Hi, my wife Jennifer, she's 36, and recently I've started to suspect she's cheating on me. And, as it turns out, I wasn't wrong. You'll be absolutely shocked when you watch this story till the end. It started with those small changes. Her schedule got busier. It started with those small changes. Her schedule got busier, her mood shifted, and she started putting in more effort to look perfect, even for the most mundane errands. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she just wanted to feel good about herself. But the way she acted, distracted, almost secretive, made it hard to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The turning point came when Jennifer began working late more frequently. It wasn't like her to miss dinner, especially with how much she loved spending time with our daughter Mary. One Thursday, I decided to surprise her with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I called her office as I pulled into the parking lot, thinking I'd tell her to come outside, but her assistant picked up instead. "Oh, Jennifer left hours ago, so," she said casually. "Around 4:30, I think. Anything I can help with?" I froze. It was almost 8:30. "No, that's fine, thanks," I mumbled before hanging up. She hadn't mentioned any plans to me. So where the hell was she? When she came home that night, I didn't say anything right away. I just watched her. Her hair was slightly out of place, and there was a faint trace of what looked like lipstick on the corner of her mouth, too bright to be hers. "How was work?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She didn't miss a beat. "Exhausting. I swear they'll kill me with all these meetings." I nodded, biting my tongue. It felt like I was staring at a stranger. The next few days, I started noticing things I hadn't before, like how she'd started locking her phone, or how she'd get a text, glance at the screen and quickly tuck it away, pretending it didn't matter. One evening, as she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't mean to look, but the notification caught my eye. "Can't wait to see you again." No name, just a number. My heart pounded as I stared at it, the water from the shower drowning out any sound. Before I could think of what to do, the notification disappeared. I put the phone back exactly where it was and left the bathroom. That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying that message. Who was texting her? And what did "see you again" mean? The next day, I decided to test her. "Hey, let's do something this weekend," I suggested over breakfast. "Maybe a day trip to the beach, just us and Mary." Jennifer barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, I can't this weekend. I've got that seminar for work, remember?" "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "Totally forgot." She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for the day, and I felt my stomach twist. That Saturday, while she was supposedly at her seminar, I called her office just to see if they could confirm it. Her assistant sounded confused. "Seminar? No, Jennifer doesn't have anything scheduled for today. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, must have mixed up the dates," I said quickly, before hanging up. My hands were shaking as I set my phone down. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was getting harder and harder to ignore the signs. That evening, Jennifer came home later than usual. I casually asked how the seminar went, and she launched into some story about a boring keynote speaker and terrible coffee. She didn't miss a beat. If she was lying, she was damn good at it. But something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The next time she left the house, I decided to follow her. What I found will leave you speechless. I waited until the following Friday when she mentioned another late meeting at work. She kissed me goodbye like always, grabbing her bag and phone before heading out the door. I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my jacket and keys. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but at this point, I couldn't just sit at home and ignore my gut feeling. I followed her car from a safe distance, staying a few vehicles back to avoid suspicion. She drove downtown where her office was located, but didn't stop there. Instead, she turned down a side street and pulled into the parking lot of a small upscale restaurant. I parked a block away and watched as she got out of her car, smoothing her dress and adjusting her hair. She looked incredible, but it wasn't for me. That realization hit me like a punch to the chest. A few moments later, a man stepped out of the restaurant, tall and sharply dressed in a suit. He walked straight toward Jennifer, and my stomach dropped when she smiled at him. One of those smiles she hadn't given me in years. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. his hand resting on the small of her back as he led her inside. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every rational part of me screamed to leave, to drive away, and pretend I didn't see any of this, but I couldn't. Instead, I waited. About an hour later, they came out together laughing. She looked at him the way she used to look at me. They didn't leave separately either, no. They got into his car, a black Mercedes. I stayed in my car, watching as they drove off into the night. I didn't follow them this time. I couldn't. The weight of what I'd just witnessed was too much. When Jennifer came home that night, I pretended to be asleep. She slipped into bed beside me, her movements careful, almost rehearsed. Her perfume lingered in the air, too strong, like she'd reapplied it to cover something else. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep doing this. I needed answers. While she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. It was locked, of course, but I'd seen her type the passcode a dozen times. My hands trembled as I entered it, half expecting to find nothing, hoping I was just being paranoid. But there it was, a string of messages from the same number I'd seen the other night. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. Let's do it again soon. Same place?" The messages weren't even subtle. My chest tightened as I scrolled through them, each one another stab to the heart, and then I saw his name, Robert. Robert Cross. I put the phone back just as I found it, my head spinning. I couldn't confront her yet. I needed more. I needed to be absolutely sure. So I waited. And what I uncovered next will blow your mind. The next few days were agonizing. Every time Jennifer smiled at me, every time she kissed my cheek or laughed with Mary, it felt fake, like she was an actress, playing the role of the perfect wife. I decided to dig deeper. One night after Jennifer fell asleep, I waited until her breathing evened out. Her phone was still on the nightstand, and this time, I didn't just check her messages. I went to her photo gallery. There were the usual pictures of Mary, selfies Jennifer had taken, and random photos of our family dog. But then I saw it. A hidden album titled Work Files. My hands shook as I tapped it. What I found inside made my stomach turn. Pictures of Jennifer in a hotel room wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. Pictures of her with him, Robert. One shot showed him leaning back on the bed, shirt unbuttoned, while Jennifer stood in front of him, grinning like she didn't have a care in the world. Another picture showed her lying beside him, her head on his chest, both of them smiling at the camera. I couldn't breathe. But then it got worse. As I scrolled, I found a video. My thumb hovered over it for what felt like forever before I finally pressed play. It was a recording of her sitting on that same hotel bed, speaking directly into the camera. "Robert, I wish we could just be together already. I'm so tired of pretending with James. He's so boring. All was the same routine, the same conversations. I feel alive with you. I'll figure out a way to end things soon, I promise." Her voice was soft, almost sweet, but the words were venomous. I felt like I'd been stabbed in the chest. I locked the phone and put it back, my heart racing. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the wall, unable to process what I'd just seen. Jennifer wasn't just cheating, she was planning to leave me. The woman I'd spent the last decade with, the mother of my child, was sitting here, plotting the end of our marriage like it was just another task on her to-do list. I knew I couldn't confront her yet, not until I had a plan. And believe me, I was going to make her regret every single lie. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with one thought. Jennifer wasn't just going to betray me. She was going to erase me from her life. If she thought I was just going to roll over and take it, she didn't know me at all. The next morning, I started putting my plan together. If Jennifer wanted to lie, manipulate, and cheat, I was going to make sure she paid for every bit of it. Quietly, methodically, I began building my arsenal. The first step was gathering more evidence. I couldn't just blow up her world without having every angle covered. I bought a hidden camera online and placed it discreetly in our bedroom, knowing that if she was careless enough to hide photos on her phone, she might slip up here too. I also reached out to an old friend of mine, Kevin, who worked in private investigations. I told him just enough to get him on board, and within days he was tailing Jennifer and Robert. It didn't take long for him to deliver. Photos of them meeting at hotels, grabbing drinks, and even leaving a spa together. But I didn't stop there. I knew Jennifer had been transferring small amounts of money from our joint account into a separate one, probably her escape fund. So I got in touch with my lawyer, who specialized in divorce cases, and had him advise me on freezing those accounts. I didn't move on it yet. I wanted her to feel safe until I was ready to pull the rug out from under her. The next piece of the puzzle was Robert. I didn't know much about him, but that was about to change. Through some digging, I learned he wasn't just some guy Jennifer met by chance. He was her boss, the same boss she'd spent months complaining about for being demanding and impossible to please. Funny how that worked out. I found out he was married too, with 2 kids and a cushy suburban life. The kind of life he probably didn't want to lose. That little detail was going to come in handy later. The last step of my plan was to act like nothing was wrong. I needed Jennifer's to believe I was oblivious, that I was still the doting husband who trusted her completely. It wasn't easy. Every time she lied to my face or made an excuse to leave the house, I had to fight the urge to confront her. Instead, I'd smile, kiss her on the cheek, and say, "Have fun, honey." But behind that smile, I was counting down the days. The day I'd blow up her perfect little fantasy world came sooner than I expected. One night, Jennifer told me she was going out with the girls. She even showed me a text thread with her friends as proof. But thanks to Kevin, I knew exactly where she was going. To that same luxury hotel where she'd been sneaking around with Robert. This time, I wasn't going to sit back and watch. I put on my best suit, grabbed the manila folder full of evidence I'd collected, and headed to the hotel. When I got there, I waited in the lobby, watching the elevator doors. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear, it was anticipation. Finally, the elevator dinged, and out they came. Jennifer, laughing and holding onto Robert's arm like they didn't have a care in the world. I walked straight up to them. "Jennifer," I said loud enough to turn a few heads in the lobby. Her face went pale. "James, what are you doing here?" "Oh, just thought I'd drop by and say hi. I figured since you've been spending so much time with Robert, I should introduce myself. You know, as your husband." Robert froze, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for an exit. "Look, man, this isn't... Save it," I snapped, cutting him off. "I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to personally hand you this." I pulled the folder out and shoved it into his hands. "You might want to take a look at that before you explain this to your wife and kids. Oh, and don't worry, Jennifer's in there too. She's just as guilty as you are." Jennifer stammered, her face a mix of shock and anger. "James, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice calm but ice cold. "You thought you could lie to me, to cheat on me, and then just walk away like nothing ever happened? Guess what, Jennifer? I'm not the idiot you think I am." I turned to walk away, but then I stopped and looked back at her. "Oh, and by the way, I've already frozen our joint accounts. Good luck funding your new life with this guy." I left them standing there speechless as I walked out of the hotel and into the night. But I wasn't done yet. The next day, I mailed copies of the evidence to Robert's wife, along with a note. "You deserve to know the truth. Sincerely, James." Jennifer thought she could destroy me, but in the end, I was the one who burned her world to the ground. As I walked out of that hotel lobby, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. For the first time, Jennifer wasn't the one pulling the strings. But as satisfying as it was to watch their smug little world crumble, I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I went to my lawyer's office to finalize my plans. Divorce papers were drawn up, and my lawyer assured me that, thanks to the evidence I'd collected, Jennifer wouldn't walk away with much. But just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Kevin. "You need to see this." I met him at a diner on the outskirts of town. He had a grim look on his face, and I could tell something wasn't right. "What is it?" I asked, sliding into the booth. Kevin pulled out a folder and pushed it across the table. "I was digging into Robert, like you asked, but then I found something else." I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. Inside were photos of Jennifer, not just with Robert, but with another man. This guy was younger, maybe mid-20s, with a cocky grin that made my blood boil. They were at a park, holding hands, laughing, even kissing. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. Kevin sighed. "It gets worse. That guy's name is Jason. Well, he's married too. But here's the kicker. He works at Mary's daycare." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The idea of Jennifer parading her affairs around my daughter's daycare of all places was too much. "You're telling me she's seeing 2 guys?" Kevin nodded. "Looks that way. And James, I think Jason's been to your house. Check the last photo." I flipped to the final picture and felt my chest tighten. It was Jason, standing on my front porch, holding what looked like a small gift bag. "She's been bringing him into our home," I muttered, my hands shaking. "Around my daughter." That changed everything. Jennifer's betrayal was one thing, but dragging Mary into her mess? That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I went home that night with my mind racing. Every time I looked at Mary, I felt a mix of love and fury. She didn't deserve any of this. She deserved a mother who cared more about her family than her ego, and a father who could protect her from people like Jennifer. The next morning, I decided to confront Jennifer, but I wasn't going to let her know what I'd found. Not yet. At breakfast, I casually mentioned Mary's daycare, so I ran into one of the teachers there the other day. Jason, I think his name was. Jennifer's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flickered to me for a split second before she forced a smile. "Oh, Jason. Yeah, he's one of the new assistants. Nice guy." "Yeah, he seemed friendly," I said, my tone deliberately neutral. Jennifer didn't respond. She just went back to eating, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Later that day, while Jennifer was out, I decided to dig deeper into her relationship with Jason. I found an old shoebox in the back of her closet stuffed with receipts, handwritten notes, and even a small envelope of Polaroids. One of the notes caught my eye. "I love how alive you make me feel. Can't wait to see you again. E." It wasn't addressed to anyone, but the date on the bottom matched the time she was supposedly working late a few weeks ago. I took pictures of everything, making sure to leave the box exactly as I found it. That evening, I told Jennifer I'd be working late, but instead, I drove to the daycare. Jason was there, locking up for the night. "Hey, Jason," I said, stepping out of my car. He froze, looking at me like a deer caught in headlights. Hi, can I help you?" "Yeah, you can. You've been seeing my wife." His face went pale. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." "You're damn right you don't," I snapped. "Because if you so much as look at my daughter again, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows what kind of man you are. Got it?" He nodded quickly, his hands raised in surrender. I left him there, trembling in the parking lot, and drove home, feeling a mix of satisfaction and anger. But when I got back, Jennifer was waiting for me in the living room. "We need to talk," she said, her voice unusually calm. "Do we?" I replied, keeping my own tone light. "Yes, I know you've been acting strange lately, and I think we need to clear the air." I raised an eyebrow. "Clear the air about what exactly?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "About us. I feel like we've been distant lately, and I don't want to lose what we have." It took every ounce of self-control not to laugh in her face. "Oh, you're worried about us now," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Funny, considering you've been spending so much time with Robert. And Jason." Her head snapped up, her face a mix of shock and panic. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Jennifer. I know everything. The hotel, the daycare, the lies. I've got it all. Photos, messages, you name it." She opened her mouth to argue, but quickly realized there was no point. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice steady, "and full custody of Mary. You can keep your affairs, your lies, and your little fantasy life, but you're not taking my daughter down with you." Jennifer stared at me, her face pale. "You can't do that. You can't just take her away from me." "Watch me," I said, turning to leave. "Oh, and by the way, Jason won't be working at the daycare anymore. Thought you should know." As I walked upstairs to pack a bag, I felt a strange sense of calm. Jennifer had underestimated me, but now she knew the truth. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for Mary, and I wasn't going to lose. Jennifer didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. I heard her pacing downstairs while I packed my things, her phone buzzing every few minutes. No doubt she was calling Robert, maybe even Jason, trying to figure out how much I knew and what her next move should be. But I wasn't waiting around for her to come up with a plan. The next morning I took Mary to school and then headed straight to my lawyer's office. I told him everything about the affairs, the photos, the receipts, and the risk Jennifer's behavior posed to our daughter. He nodded gravely, taking notes and assuring me that we had a strong case for custody. Judges don't look kindly on parents who prioritize their personal lives over their children's well-being, he said. Good. I returned home to find Jennifer sitting at the kitchen table, her hair a mess and her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I walked in, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy for her. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. "I don't think we do," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Please, James," she said, standing up. "I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this, for Mary's sake." I turned to face her, my jaw clenched. "You want to fix this, don't? You're a little late for that, don't you think? You weren't thinking about Mary when you brought your boyfriends into our lives. You weren't thinking about her when you lied to my face every day. So don't stand there and act like you're suddenly the concerned parent." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. But then she straightened up, her expression hardening. "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "You want to end this? Let's end it. But don't think for a second that you're taking Mary away from me." That was the moment I realized Jennifer wasn't going to go down without a fight. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, lawyer meetings, and tense encounters with Jennifer. She refused to leave the house, claiming she had just as much right to be there as I did. So we lived like strangers, barely speaking, each of us pretending the other didn't exist. But then something happened that shifted everything. I was in Mary's room helping her with her homework when I noticed a small box tucked under her bed. "What's this, sweetie?" I asked, pulling it out. "It's from Mommy," she said, her voice hesitant. Inside the box was a collection of small trinkets, a bracelet, a few photos, and a handwritten note that made my blood run cold. "Mary, I know this is hard for you, but Mommy loves you so much. One day, when it's just the two of us, we'll start over and be happy again. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll make sure we're together soon. Love, Mommy." My hands shook as I put the note back in the box. Jennifer wasn't just planning to fight for custody, she was planning to take Mary away. I stormed downstairs, the box clutched in my hand. Jennifer was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, but she looked up when I entered the room. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, throwing the box onto the coffee table. Her eyes widened as she saw the contents, but she quickly composed herself. "It's just a note, James. Don't overreact." "Don't overreact?" I spat. "You're writing secret messages to our daughter about running away. Are you out of your mind?" I was trying to reassure her, she said defensively. "She's scared, James. She needs to know that I'm here for her." "You mean she needs to know that you're willing to rip her away from her home, her school, her friends, and her father?" I shot back. "You think that's what's best for her?" Jennifer glared at me, her mask of composure cracking. "You've already turned her against me. Every time I try to talk to her, she looks at me like I'm the villain. You're poisoning her against me, James." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You did that all on your own. That was the breaking point." Jennifer stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her, while I stood there, my heart pounding. The next day, I met with my lawyer again and handed him the note. He read it carefully, his brow furrowing. "This changes things," he said. "We can argue that Jennifer's behavior is unstable and that she poses a risk to Mary's emotional well-being." "Do whatever you have to do," I said. "I don't care what it takes. I'm not letting her take my daughter." But even as I said the words, I knew Jennifer wasn't going to give up easily. She was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. I needed to be one step ahead of her, no matter what. What I discovered next, though, took everything to a whole new level. A week later, I came home to find Jennifer gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, her closet was half empty, and her phone charger was missing from the kitchen counter. For a moment, I felt a strange flicker of hope. Maybe she'd finally decided to leave. But when I walked into Mary's room, that hope turned to dread. Her bed was empty, her favorite stuffed animal was gone, and her backpack was missing from its usual spot by the door. I grabbed my phone and called Jennifer, but it went straight to voicemail. My chest tightened as I scrolled through my contacts, finally landing on Mary's daycare. "Hi, this is James. Mary's dad. Did Jennifer pick her up today?" The woman on the other end of the line hesitated. "Yes, she picked her up about an hour ago. Is everything okay?" No, nothing was okay. "Yeah, everything's fine," I lied, ending the call. I tried to stay calm as I checked every room in the house for some kind of clue. That's when I found it. A folder on Jennifer's desk labeled Mary's Records. Inside were copies of her birth certificate, school enrollment forms, and even a blank passport application. Jennifer was planning to disappear, and she was taking Mary with her. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed my keys and drove to the bank, praying I wasn't too late. When I got there, the teller confirmed my worst fear. Jennifer had withdrawn the maximum amount from our joint account just 30 minutes earlier. I felt like the walls were closing in. She was gone, and she'd taken my daughter. But then I remembered something. My lawyer had advised me to install a tracking app on Mary's tablet just in case Jennifer tried to pull something like this. I pulled out my phone and opened the app, my hands shaking as the GPS signal loaded. There. A location popped up about 20 miles away. There she's, at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I didn't think, I just drove. When I got there, I spotted Jennifer's car in the parking lot. I parked a few spaces away and called the police, explaining the situation as clearly as I could. They assured me they'd send someone immediately, but I couldn't wait. I marched into the motel lobby and demanded to know which room she was in. The clerk looked nervous, but when I mentioned my daughter and showed him Mary's photo, he gave me the room number without hesitation. I reached the door and banged on it, my heart pounding. "Jennifer, open the damn door!" There was a shuffle inside, and then the door creaked open just enough for me to see her face. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, trying to block my view of the room. "Where's Mary?" I demanded, pushing past her. Inside, Mary was sitting on the bed, clutching her stuffed animal with tears streaming down her face. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with relief. "Daddy," she cried, running into my arms. I held her tightly, my anger boiling over as I turned back to Jennifer. "You were going to take her and run," I said, my voice shaking. "Were you even going to tell me, or was I just supposed to find out when you were halfway across the country?" Jennifer's face twisted in defiance. "You left me no choice, James. You've been trying to take her away from me ever since this started." "No," I said firmly. "I've been trying to protect her. From you." Before Jennifer could respond, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing there. "Sir, we received a report about a potential abduction," one of them said. I nodded. "She was trying to take my daughter out of state without my permission. I have proof." Jennifer tried to argue, but the officers weren't having it. They asked her to step outside while they questioned me, and I handed over everything. Mary's records, the note I'd found, and the tracking app showing her location. It didn't take long for them to see the truth. One of the officers turned to me and said, "You have full custody now, sir. We'll make sure she can't take her again." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as they escorted Jennifer to her car. She screamed at me, calling me every name in the book, but I didn't care. All that mattered was Mary. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes and said, "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" I kissed her forehead and smiled. "Yeah, sweetie, we're going to be just fine." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Jennifer wasn't the type to give up, and I had a feeling she'd try to claw her way back into our lives. I was ready for her. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of relief and paranoia. Jennifer was gone, temporarily at least, and Mary and I were finally able to settle into a routine without the constant tension. But I knew better than to think this was over. Jennifer didn't go quietly. She filed a motion in court to regain custody, claiming I'd manipulated her and set her up. She even tried to paint me as an unfit father, throwing everything she could to make me look bad. But my lawyer was ready, armed with the mountain of evidence I'd collected. Her affairs, the note about taking Mary away, the motel incident. The hearing was brutal. Jennifer cried on the stand, weaving a story about how she was just a misunderstood wife and mother who had been driven to desperation by my supposed controlling nature. Her lawyer tried to discredit me, pointing out every argument we'd ever had, every minor mistake I'd made as a husband. But then it was my turn. My lawyer presented the facts, piece by piece, leaving no room for doubt. The photos of Jennifer and Robert, the messages, the hotel receipts, it all painted a clear picture of who she really was. When they brought up Mary's safety, I held back nothing. I told the court about the note Jennifer left for our daughter, the tracking app that led me to the motel, and the way Mary had cried in my arms that night. Jennifer's face twisted with rage as I spoke, but she couldn't refute any of it. She sat there, silent, as the weight of her actions came crashing down on her. The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity before delivering the verdict. "I'm awarding full custody to Mr. Anderson," she said. "Mrs. Anderson's behavior demonstrates a clear lack of judgment and stability, which poses a risk to the child's well-being. She will retain supervised visitation rights, but only under strict conditions." I wanted to jump out of my seat and cheer, but I held it together. Instead, I simply nodded, my hands trembling with a mix of relief and exhaustion. Jennifer stormed out of the courtroom without looking back. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But the final blow came a few days later. Robert's wife, the one I'd sent the evidence to, reached out to me. Her name was Lauren, and she wanted to meet. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect, but when we sat down at a coffee shop, she handed me a folder of her own. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were financial documents, text messages, and even emails between Robert and Jennifer. Apparently, their affair wasn't just personal, it was professional too. They'd been funneling money out of the company using fake invoices and bogus expenses to fund their little rendezvous. "Robert's already been fired," Lauren said with a grim smile. "But the company's filing criminal charges against both of them. Jennifer might be looking at jail time." I stared at the folder, stunned. I'd wanted justice, but this was more than I'd ever expected. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet. Lauren nodded. "They deserve whatever's coming to them." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. Jennifer had spent so much time trying to destroy me, but in the end, she'd destroyed herself. Now, it was just me and Mary. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me and smiled. "I love you, Daddy." For the first time in a long time, I felt like the nightmare was finally over. And no matter what came next, I knew we'd be okay. Thank you for listening. The story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos.